slow it down. I mean, they were much faster paced. We're going to start slowing it down now and really go piece by piece. So once you have the written Torah, which is codified or canonized, the word canon means to close, which means you don't add anything else to it. The Torah, the 5 books of Moses, we generally believe to be canonized around 500 BCE, which would be the same time frame post-Babylonian exile. When you look at the Hebrew Bible as a whole, that is the timeline. But the 5 books of Moses itself, there are no more additions and no more deletions after approximately the 6th century before the Common Era, 500 BCE.
So the 500 BCE correlates with the Dead Sea Scrolls.
The answer is no.
I thought the Dead Sea Scrolls were about 500 BCE.
They are, but when it says correlate, the Dead Sea Scroll go a little beyond. What I'm talking about is the 5 books of Moses are done. In other words, no one is adding or saying that it came this. It's done.
All right.
Okay? When we say it's canonized, between 500 BCE and 200 BCE, which is the beginning of the Talmudic academies, that is when the prophetic books start to be canonized, and that is the same timeline of the Dead Sea Scrolls because we see it being validated. In other words, what we have recovered, we can see in cross-checking of sources.
Okay.
So that's where the time. Yes, 6th century before the Common Era, but as far as a closed book, I think it's still fluid at that point, except for the first 5 books. When you look at the Christian canonization, the difference you'll find between us and theirs, with regard to what they call the Old Testament, is they have Ruth as one of the judges. We don't. And it was strictly an interpretation, nothing more. But the word judge does not mean I'm adjudicating between 2 points of view. The word judge in the Hebrew text means I am trying to tell you to follow God's ways. And when you do, things will be good. When you don't, things don't go well. And that is the book of Judges.
So,
good, bad, good, bad, good, bad.
So this is a revelation. So even when they refer to the Old Testament, they don't even agree with us what the Old Testament consists of.
The answer is they absolutely agree with that. It's just the placement of a book. They put Ruth with Judges in the middle section.
Okay.
But what they call the Old Testament is our Bible. They don't add or subtract. It's just their placement of one book is out of whack. That's it. And I shouldn't say out of whack. It's just not in the same place. The other thing is the way they count it. We have 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings. The handout's right there, guys.
Sorry.
They just have Samuel. I'm sorry. They have 1st and 2nd Samuel as 2 separate books. We just call it one that has 2 parts. They have 1st and 2nd Kings. We just call it Kings. We call it one with 2 parts. All right. Ezra and Nehemiah, the 2 high priests who lead the Jews from Babylonian exile back to the land of Israel in 540 to 500, they sometimes see it as 1 or 2 people. It doesn't matter. But the point is, though, what from the beginning of Genesis to the end of 2nd Chronicles, our Tanakh, Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, is the same what they call the Old Testament, with the exception of where Ruth is placed. That is it. It's identical.
Okay.
Right? What we don't have is what they call the New and Improved Covenant, otherwise known as the New Testament. Okay? That, the earliest writing, is approximately 50 to 70 of the Common Era, which is Matthew, even though he's the 2nd prophet. It's Mark, Matthew, Luke.
Okay.
The 2nd gospel, not prophet, gospel, or disciple. But the early canonization of the New Testament, meaning closed and now making decisions, this is a matter of debate between 230 and 300. Now, why such a wide gap? Because then you have the division that happened in the church itself between the Eastern Orthodox and Western Christianity. And then what they considered sacred canonization, meaning that of Jesus and God, versus the additional or unknown authors. Additional, the apocryphal writings, or the unknown, the pseudepigrapha writings. And depending on which denomination of Christianity you ascribe to, is where the books are.
So I was doing some research, and I found this thing on the internet that showed a comparison between Judaism,
Right.
scripts, Christianity, and Islam.
right?
Okay, and what I was shocked to find out was we really have more. Islam also recognizes the Old Testament,
Of course, absolutely.
and when you realize we actually have more in common our religions than there are differences.
Oh, God, yes.
You know, which is like, and we have such fear about the different other religions.
But that is because of hierarchical leadership over the years of supersessionism. Supersessionism means my religion is more valid than your religion because I have succeeded you. And it's Judaism, Christianity, and then Islam. Islam is not until the 5th or 6th century of the Common Era. 622-ish, right? So here's the thing. In the Quran, Moses and Jesus are held in very high regard. The rabbis and priests are held in very low regard because they took the true meaning of the text and corrupted it. And it's because Muhammad who then cleansed it and made it better. I mean, it's self-serving writing, but you get the point. Okay? All right. That's the text. And now getting to our opening discussion. What is everything else? Everything else is, like you said, trying to understand what the meaning of this text is. What are these rules and regulations? And so you have the agadic. Agadic means to tell the story versus halakhic, to walk in the way or the law. So in that process, we have the Talmud, we have the Mishneh, all this other stuff. And that's going to be great until the 13th century, when Moses Maimonides comes along and creates a book called the Mishneh Torah. The Mishneh Torah, by definition, literally means the teaching of Torah. But it can also mean the review of the Torah. Prior to this text, he wrote two other books. I'm sorry, he wrote one before this and then he wrote after this. This was done around 1180 of the Common Era, so the latter part of the 12th century. This is what we call the golden age of Jewish life in the Iberian Peninsula. Because the church was not in power. That all gets screwed up in the 1400s.
Iberian Peninsula.
Iberian Peninsula, by definition, would be Portugal, Spain, and Italy, but can also refer to Northern Africa, Morocco, Fez, and that, because there were definitely big Jewish communities there. You know, one of the tragedies of fundamentalist Islamic faith of today is an absolute rejection of the incredible, extraordinary contribution that Islam made to society in mathematics and science and so forth. What do you think we call the numbers, what we write numbers with? They're called Arabic numerals for a reason. Okay? I mean, it's amazing what we have, and yet how fundamentalism has rejected such a huge portion of that. Okay? So what he did was, prior to this book, he discerned for us 613 mitzvot, or commandments, from the beginning of Genesis to the end of Deuteronomy. So in case you're ever on Jeopardy, be fruitful and multiply was the first commandment stated in the Torah. Make a copy of this book for yourself with the last commandment in the Torah. Okay, those are your Jeopardy questions, all right? The rabbi that I quoted at my story on Yom Kippur morning, Evan Goodman, his wife, Lori Goodman, was on Jeopardy on the 11th and 12th of September. She won on the 11th, and then the 12th she came in second place. So she did really well. Kind of fun. Anyway, those 613 were subdivided into 248 positive and 365 negative, which is funny. The negatives are all thou shalt nots. 365 equals the number of days of the year. Why is that funny? Because that's based on the solar calendar, not the lunar calendar which we live by. 248 positive are equal to the number of bones in your body. You don't have 248 bones. 216, 222, I get the number.
206.
Anybody remember?
206.
206, I'm sorry, right? You don't have 248. Okay? But again, is how he figured it out. Now, he was a physician. Okay? So what he did was, he took all of the laws as elucidated in the Mishnah, which is the first core part of the Talmud, and put it into a compendium. And the way the book is set up, it is set up as a variety of smaller books, or Sefer books. There's the Hama, and it's all in your packet on page 2. The Book of Knowledge, Book of Love, and so forth. And each of the books then have a subsection, which then tells you about called Hilchot, the laws of. Most of the laws that we understand in Judaism today is all because of this book. Right? Now, the methodology here was he wanted to make sure that people had all of the law in one handy text, so they wouldn't have to keep looking up in various sources. Obviously, the very first critical piece of this was he was sometimes denying the minority opinion, which is very much a part of our tradition. Nevertheless, this became the opus of all Jewish law, without question. Okay? Now, he did not write this book. Why? Because there's English translations of it. He did not speak English. All right? All right. And so he wanted to have an organization that was similar to the Mishnah, but without the loose process of the Talmudic argument, which goes like this. The laws of Shabbat say you light 2 candles. And I was walking to the store one night, and my wife said, you better get 3 candles. Why? And no, it goes on another tangent before you get back to what the law is. So he got rid of that. And he wanted to make sure that the theoretical and non-functional branches of the Oral Torah were somehow maintained a little bit, but without being a waste of time, so you knew what to do right away. In other words, if you wanted to know how long your matzah should be, you will go to this book and find the answer. 18 minutes. As far as rising. Okay? And he also removed all citations in the name of, which of course bothers some other people, which are obvious reasons. Alright. So what I wanted to do, all we're going to do today is read the introduction that he wrote. He meaning Moses Maimonides, Rabbi Maimon ben come on, Larry, you're waking up here.
Johnson.
Moshe ben Maimon. I couldn't remember his first name. Moshe. That was his Hebrew name. He's called the Rambam, which is the abbreviation for Rabbi Abraham Moshe ben Maimon. Rambam. His grandson, Nachmanides, is Ramban. The Nach part of it. And so forth. Alright? This is his introduction to this opus. I have more pages here of every rabbi certifying this book is kosher. Okay. The reason why I'm starting here, because we're going to get a lot of theology that helps us understand why everything else is the way it is. So you should be on the, where it says Introduction to Mishneh Torah. Alright? So at the very beginning in the Hebrew, I'm just going to tell you what it says. Hakadamat HaRabam, Zikron Bracha, which to me is funny, because he did not write it that way. He would not have said in my blessed memory. It says here, and this is the forward or the beginning of the Rambam of blessed memory, B'Shem Adonai, in the name of God, Elohim, that's how they would have written it, because that way about writing out God's name, Olam, sovereign of the world, Oslo, Abosh, and so forth, all right? So in the name of God, Lord of the world, and did I keep all that at the end? I'm trying to make sure. I did. I kept you all the notes so you know where all the cross references are. And so the heading introduction is not found any in the manuscript edition of Mishneh Torah, and appears to be a printer edition. There has been debate on this, if he wrote this or someone else. We don't know. Okay? But at the beginning, it's the introduction to the text, and not necessarily an author's preamble as much as it is for us to understand how the text is supposed to be working.
So the
Go ahead.
so this introduction to the Mishnah.
Mishneh Torah.
I'm sorry,
Yeah, I want to make sure what we're talking about.
Mishneh Torah. We were traveling behind a slow moving
No worries, I
car.
got a message on your way, so it's all good.
Just slow. I looking at the first page, not even. It seems that they take pieces from the Bible.
Yes.
And is it a compilation?
The whole thing as a whole is a compilation. Are you talking about the introduction?
Yeah.
At the very beginning it is, briefly, but not the whole thing. And in other words, they're trying to validate the legitimacy of this sacred text in this opening. The thing is, their part of this is to give us, which is what I wanted you to have. I'm sorry, I forgot one very important piece. Forgive me, it just clicked in my head. In the New Testament, that's where I'm going, we have this guy named Jesus. You heard of him? All right. So, when Jesus is born, of course, part of the theology of the New Testament that he is the anointed one by God. He is the Messiah. Well, as we all know, the early followers of Christianity, they're all Jewish. In order to have a Mashiach, one anointed by God, it must come from the lineage of David. And so in Mark and Matthew in particular, they will show you the lineage from Adam all the way to Jesus. Yeah, there are big chunks of leap of genealogy. But nevertheless, they're trying, and there's a reason, because you have to validate why. On Shavuot, when we celebrate confirmation and the Feast of Weeks, the Haftarah that we read, of course, is from the book of Ruth. The last part of the Haftarah that our students read, and so-and-so begot so-and-so begot so-and-so, and Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David. And the reason is, we're actually showing in our own text how Ruth, the great-grandmother of King David, the Messiah, the anointed one by God, we do the same thing. Well, likewise, we're going to do that here, but here is more of what we believe to be the legitimate transmission of the written oral tradition from God and Moses to now. And now meaning Moses Maimonides. Right.
So that also parallels how our services are done, because you said a lot of this was taken from the courts, the laws.
So worship services?
Yes.
Yeah, you are correct.
So showing lineage becomes, very important.
Oh, absolutely. And again, we always stay connected to the past so that we can keep carrying into the future. You're absolutely correct. The image, I have this fantasy, which I know is physically impossible.
Besides Harold's?
Besides Harold's, yes. Is that during the East service, the camera turns on, sees the congregation, and you'll see the loved one sitting next to you. Now, that could probably freak some people out. I don't know. But the movies, they can do that. We don't have that capacity. But my point is because we're not there alone. The memories of our loved ones is supposed to be superimposed upon us, if you will. And they're supposed to say, I'm okay, live your life, make the next generation, if you will. But it's the same concept. You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. Okay. So I will not be ashamed when I gaze at all your mitzvot. That is from Psalms. The concept is not that I'm ashamed looking at your commandments, but I might feel ashamed that, oh my God, how am I going to do all this? And the answer is you're not. Okay? The mitzvot given to Moses at Mount Sinai were all given together with their explanations. Our tradition is, here are the tablets, and everything else I'm telling you, that became the old tradition. As implied, I will give you the tablets of the stone, the Torah and the mitzvah. In other words, there was the stone itself, comma, the Torah, comma, and the mitzvah, i.e. the explanation. Now the Torah refers to the written law, we got that. The mitzvah to its explanation, and only because I know the text, that's why I jumped ahead. And the mitzvah, the oral law itself, okay, just telling us. Now, Moses, our teacher, personally transcribed the entire Torah before he died. No, we didn't. All right, that's our tradition. You do realize the last 4 verses of the Torah, Deuteronomy chapter 34, verses 9, 10, 11, 12, it's kind of hard to write when you're dead. But tradition says, God said, here you go, finish it, now I'm going to take care of it. And it's kind of hard to write the entire book of Genesis up until the 3rd chapter of Exodus when you're not alive. But according to tradition, Moses wrote it all, hence the name 5 books of Moses. All right. He gave a Torah scroll to each tribe and placed another scroll in the ark as a testimonial. Take this scroll and place it in the ark, their testimonial. Okay, I'm glad they clarified that. The mitzvah, for example, the explanation of the Torah, he did not transcribe. Instead, he commanded it verbally to the elders, to Joshua, and the totality of Israel. As Deuteronomy states, be careful to observe everything that I prescribe to you, for this reason it's called the oral law. In other words, we're explaining from the very core beginning. We're using the text to validate everything we're telling us. Even though it was not transcribed, Moses, our teacher, taught it in its entirety in his court to the 70 elders. What court? Eleazar, Pinchas, and Joshua received the tradition from Moses. Who are Eleazar and Pinchas? The 2 head priestly Levites. But don't forget, Nadab and Abihu are dead. They were killed in the strange fire offering. In particular, Moses transmitted the oral law to Joshua, who was his primary disciple, and instructed him regarding it. And all the proof texts giving him the validation of that. And then, through his life, he taught to the law. Many elders received the tradition from him. Eli, who is the prophet during the time of Samuel, received the tradition from the elders from Pinchas. Samuel received the tradition from Eli. And then David received the tradition from Samuel, because Samuel is the one who helped pick David when he goes to Jesse's house in Bethlehem. Yes? Okay, no silly question. Go ahead.
It says he gave a Torah scroll
Right?
to each tribe
Yes.
and placed another scroll in the ark.
Correct.
Am I missing something? Where does the broken pieces of the...
In the ark. When we say the ark, by the way, don't think what we have now.
Oh, I know that.
Think the crate, if you will. So you have the broken pieces.
Is that somewhere in here?
In that text, give me 1 second. With the proof text again, please. 31:26. And...
Because I'm reading a book now about Moses. So this is...
All right. "31 is Ha'azinu? No, that's Vayela, excuse me. Was 31:26?
Yes.
Take this book of teaching, place it beside the ark of the covenant of the eternal God, and let it remain there as witnesses against you." But it doesn't tell me what else is in there, but I know the broken tablet is Aaron's staff. That is the almond sprouting and the snake head. There's no Holy Grail, meaning no chalice. That's another tradition. So, yeah, so, and the scroll, right, the 3 items. Okay? Yep. Okay, no, it's a great question.
That comes a long time later.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a great story, though. It makes a good movie. It actually makes it 4 movies, which is milking to death. Anyway. So it's Samuel and David, and then Achiah Shiloh, one of those who experienced the exodus from Egypt. He was a Levite and heard teaching from Moses. He was, however, of low stature in Moses' age. Afterwards, he received the tradition from David in his court. So now, note 10. See Baba Batra 121b. In other words, it's giving us a Talmudic reference. So it is what we call a Baraita, a story that's being passed down. Because this is a guy whose name appears. So we have to speculate, who is this guy? And so from that, he is going to be that first leap that's going to teach Elijah. Achiah of Shiloh taught Elijah. And then Elisha, who was Elijah's disciple, learned from Elijah. Then Jehoiada, the priest, received the tradition from Elisha. Zechariah and so forth. And then Zechariah to Amos. Amos to Hosea. Hosea to Isaiah. Isaiah to Micah. Micah to Joel, Joel to Nahum to Habakkuk. And you draw the minor prophets, right? Habakkuk to Nahum to Habakkuk to Zephaniah. And then Jeremiah gets it from Zephaniah. And then Baruch ben Neriah got it from Jeremiah, who then teaches to Ezra. So we get from Moses, Mount Sinai, to Babylonian exile. And I just want to look at one note here, 11. Jeremiah and Baruch witnessed the destruction of the first temple. Yeah, okay, that's in the text of Jeremiah. And that's Baruch, and that's how they get that. All right. And so Ezra teaches Baruch. Then the members of Ezra's court are referred to as Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, the men of the great assembly. They included Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, Nehemiah ben Chachaliah, Mordecai the linguist, Zerubbabel, and many other sages, 120 elders in all. This is post-first temple destruction, or as the temple is being destroyed. The Anshe Knesset HaGedolah presided over the return of Zion at the beginning of the Second Temple period, which is approximately, I'm reading the note, which is approximately 540 to 500 before the Common Era, and set the foundation for the reconstruction of the nation. So we get from Moses to post-First Temple. The last surviving member of that group who left Babylon and came to Israel was Shimon or Simeon the Just, Simon. He was included among the 120 elders and received the oral law of all of them. He served as high priest after Ezra. Then we have Antinos of Sopha and his court, get it from Simeon the Just. Then Yossi ben Yoezer of Serediah and Yosef ben Yochanan of Jerusalem, they get it from Antinos. Yehoshua ben Parachia and Natai of Arbel get it from Yossi ben Yoezer and Yosef ben Parachiah. Then Yehuda ben Tabai and so forth and so on. And then we get to Yehuda and Shimon, who teach who? Hillel and Shammai. So now you have a bunch of names. For the average person, means absolutely nothing. But if you look in the Talmud, we see these names listed, and they list it just verbatim as I just said it here. You know as well as I did, just because in the Talmud does not make it absolute truth. But we have nothing to dispute it, but we also have nothing to validate it either. So I want to be very fair about that. But again, this is our leap of faith from the Babylonian exile to the formation of the great rabbinic academies of Hillel and Shammai, which are in Babylon. They're not in the land of Israel. Never forget that. They are approximately 200 before the Common Era. So Hillel and Shammai will then translate it, and this is all pure Talmudic lineage. And this is what we call the royalty of the Talmudic family. We joked last night there was a royal reform wedding. Rabbi Danny Freelander and Lise Frischman, both rabbis, their son married the daughter of Rabbi Rex Perlmeter, Rabbi Rachel, what is Rachel's last name?
Oh,
it's not Perlmeter, Rachel. No, not Facebook.
I said I saw it on Facebook.
Facebook, yeah. So we call that the Reform Royal Wedding. I mean, you have two mockers in the Reform movement, and their children marrying each other, so it's kind of funny. Because my wife then goes, what about the Grumbacher address wedding? Meaning my former senior rabbi's son married Richard Address's daughter, Liz, Alex and Liz. I said only one side was royalty. So it wasn't my senior rabbi. So it was all good. Anyway, so we get Hillel Shammai, then we get to Yochanan ben Zakkai and Shimon, son of Hillel. And we have, Yochanan ben Zakkai, and had 5 students. Elazar the Great, Yehoshua, Yossi the priest, Shimon ben Nathanael, and Elazar ben Araf. And then Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef got it from all of them. The point is, and Rabbi Akiva, of course, Yosef was a righteous convert. Because Akiva is the one who started studying at age 40. These are all the mockers. And now, but we at least get a timeline.
And how do we know that story? I mean, I learned that story in Hebrew school when I was a kid.
Rabbi Akiva getting flayed, as he said, the Shema as he dies.
That too.
That's in the Talmud.
Oh, well, okay.
It's all in the Talmud. Not Midrash, it's in the Talmud. Okay?
Okay.
So here's the thing. They're real. I mean, they really existed. Whether he died with it, whether someone sat there with a notepad and recording all this, that's a different story. But the point is that we can at least get the timeline. So in this timeline, we somehow went from 200 BCE to almost 200 CE. So there's a gap, but not that big of a gap. There are some corruptions that's taking place here. One, of course, is during the time of the Hasmonean dynasty, or otherwise known as the Maccabean Revolt. Because Zadok was the high priest, but you're not going to see Zadok's name. Okay? And the other problem is Talmudic names tend to get recycled. Because Hillel can be Hillel the senior or the elder. And then there's his grandson Hillel. And there's another Hillel. And so forth. I mean, we have a problem with that. So we have to figure out where, who, what, and how. Okay? So from all of them, you get Ishmael and Meir. Well, the great Midrashic Talmudists. And then they got it from Akiva. Then Meir got it from Rabbi Ishmael. And then Meir and Yehuda, Ben Yossi, Shimon, Nehemiah, all these other guys. And then Rabbi Akiva, the colleagues, also received the tradition. And they pass it on to Yochanan ben Nuri. Finally, we get Rabbi Gamliel the elder, who gets the tradition for Rabbi Shimon. And then they continue passing it on down. You have Rabbi Gamliel the elder, and you have his Rabbi Gamliel his son. Rabbi Yehuda gets it from Shimon, and he's often referred to as Rabbeinu HaKadosh, our saintly teacher, and he got it from his father. And now on page 6 of 23, which is on the bottom right-hand
Is
corner.
there a reason why in
Yeah, go ahead.
and this is like who's on first?
Yeah, exactly what it is.
And Rabbi, they signify that Rabbi Yochanan was a shoemaker. Is that important?
It is only important is that he copied it directly what it said in the Talmud.
Oh, okay.
Okay? So now the question is, it's funny that, what page are you looking at? There's a reason why. No, there's a reason why, because I want to look at the Hebrew fast.
5/23? Yeah.
So I'm looking for the shoemaker. I see the
Top of the page.
Top of the page, thank you. Shoemaker, Rabbi Yochanan the shoemaker. There's a reason why I'm looking, 1 second. Shel Rabbi Akiva, Chaviro, Shel Rabbi Akiva. No, I went too far. Come on, I go there. Eliezer Nehemiah, Ben Shemua, Rabbi Yochanan, Hassan. Okay, because in Hebrew it's Hassanler, sandal. Okay, that's why I wanted to take a look. So he's a shoemaker, but his last name is Sandler, not as in Adam Sandler. Sandler means shoemaker. Okay, but it goes to be Sandler or Standler. Sometimes you'll see a T put in there. So they're calling it that here, but I just want to be clear, that's why. So he was a shoemaker, but that was his name, because that's how he was known. Don't forget, surnames were non-existent. And most surnames early on, particularly in the Jewish community, was based on your profession. Winemaker, shoemaker, barrel Cooper.
Miller.
I mean, exactly. Well, but that's where it came from. You're absolutely right. Okay. All right.
Was this lineage by birth or by teaching?
Once more.
Was the lineage?
By birth or by teaching. So the answer is lineage is based upon learning. You learn from the best teacher, and when you became the best student, you became the next teacher. So yes, and when you could be born into the family and become that teacher, as we see with Gamliel the elder and Gamliel his son, Hillel the elder and his grandson and so forth. Absolutely. But it wasn't just a birth progeny right. You had to acquire the knowledge. Okay? All right. So now we're on page 6 of 23. Rabbeinu HaKadosh, the saintly one, composed the Mishnah. Well, that's not completely true, because we also have this tradition, of course, of Judah the Prince.
What's the difference between Mishneh Torah and just Mishnah?
Okay, so Mishnah, in its literal sense, is the oral tradition that Moses received at Mount Sinai, and what we're talking about here is Mishnah as the introduction to the Mishneh Torah. In other words, they want to validate, or he wanted to validate, that this is legitimate, because all I did was take everything that you already know and put it in a concise, easy-to-read format. Okay? Not all of this is in the Mishnah. Some of it is already elucidated in the Talmud, because Mishnah doesn't spend time going over lineage. But the Talmud will say, well, how do I know this? I learned it from so-and-so, who learned it from so-and-so, who learned it from so-and-so. So this is putting it all together so we have a complete timeline. Okay? All right. So the Mishnah, from the days of Moses, our teacher, until Rabbeinu HaKadosh, no one had composed a text for the purpose of teaching the oral law in public. So in other words, it was a clear oral transmission that finally got written down. So when is the Mishnah written down? About 200 CE. Now, some say as early as 200 BCE, and the reason they say that is because the rabbinic leadership was already decimated with the final fall of any Jewish leadership in the land of Israel. So there's a great debate about that. Okay. So, in each generation, the head of the court or the prophet of that generation would take notes of the teaching, which he received from his masters for himself, and teach them verbally in public. So it's making two assumptions in that statement. Number one, you're making an assumption there's a level of literacy. A friend of mine is going to China, and she already spoke to whoever's handling her there that I have no problem taking a taxi. I just want you to write it down for me in Chinese so I can hand it to the taxi driver so I can get to where I need to go. And they said, we'll do that, but unfortunately many taxi drivers are not literate in the written form. They can speak Chinese, obviously, but they don't necessarily know how to read it, which I found fascinating. So that's the same concept in our tradition.
You have to record it on your iPhone.
I'm sorry?
You have
Well,
to
the iPhone
record
now,
it.
you're right. And all that. You have Google Translate and so forth. You can say, this is where I want you to go. Right. But you have to say it out loud. Right. Exactly. No question. Technology now allows us to do things that we couldn't do before. But what I'm trying to get at is that, we always say the Jews are the people of the book and must be very literate. Not really true. We are people of the book, that we have a tradition that we continue to transmit from generation to generation. And we are getting away from the physical book to other expressions of the same book, electronic, whatever else, so forth. Doesn't mean we stop reading people the book, we're just looking at a different form. I guarantee you, your grandchildren, no, maybe not my grandchildren, are going to look at this as a very archaic device. Shame or otherwise, I don't know, because you can't swat a bug with an iPad, you'll break it. But you can with a book. Or my personal favorite is, why are you using that? Here's an iPad. Why are you using that? Here's an iPad. And so I'm in the bathroom, I need some toilet paper, and they slip the iPad with a picture of toilet paper on it. There you go. So the same concept, forgive me. Allie is in New York City this weekend, where she lives, but a friend of hers works for a nonprofit in D.C. that's about getting out the vote. And apparently yesterday with Broadway gets out the vote. So Allie assisted. So she has pictures of her hanging out with the actress who plays Maisel.
The marvelous.
Mrs. Maisel, so who she adores. So great, that was the picture. So anyway, so whether or not there are actual notes or something, I can't ascertain that. But clearly there was a repetition of the oral tradition that they memorized it. Most imams who run a mosque do have the entire Quran memorized. And most followers of Islam memorize the Quran from the day they could first hear it. My great story, Professor Isaac Yerushalmi of blessed memory. Wrong one. Sorry. Wrong one. Ben Zion Bachholder of blessed memory. They're both deceased now, but he was raised in Orthodox shtibel in the true sense of the word. He was professor of Talmud in Cincinnati along with Mark Wachowski. I wrote my thesis with Mark. But Ben Zion, I'm turning this off, I apologize. There we go. He was blind, 100% blind. We would study Talmud. Now remember I showed you the Talmudic page. You have the text in the middle, then you have Rashi on one side, you have all the sorts of other commentary and all the... We'd be reading, and go, no, that's the word. I'm like, oh, you're right, thank you. And then he said, what does Rashi say? And I said, no, Rashi says this. I'm like, yeah, what's the... He had every daf, every page completely memorized. Everything.
Wow.
He did not retire without controversy, but in a good way. The Dead Sea Scroll, only because you brought that up, is that he and a grad student, because the Dead Sea Scroll people have been holding on to them, wouldn't let it go, to release them. So they kind of took advantage of whatever was available and said, screw you, we're going to translate it. So his grad student got a television, like a 40-inch screen, whatever was available in the late 80s, early 90s, connected the computer, and blew everything up to like 300 point, so he could see it a little bit. He translated several pages. The Dead Sea Scroll folks sued him and HUC, got thrown out because there was no basic work. They were illegally holding on to stuff they shouldn't be holding on to. And that finally broke the doors open for them to start translating the Dead Sea Scrolls more actively now, where we can see the correlation between the Hebrew Scripture, New Testament, and other pieces of stuff. And he was the one who started that. He was an amazing human being. Really was. Anyway, so the idea of transmitting was very much alive and well. Anyway, so according to his own potential, each person would write notes for him or herself. Again, what are they writing notes on? Are people carrying scrolls of parchment around with them? Nobody has a notepad. There's no quick pen yet, right? You need a quill or something. So that's why I said some of this is a little stretch, okay? And they would, do that, and each generation would deduce what the laws were that were not included in the oral tradition. The oral tradition cannot tell you what to do with an elevator on Shabbat. So we had to figure it out based on other things.
So what are the 13 principles of...
Say again?
What are the 13 principles?
The 13 principles, are you familiar with a Hebrew song called Yigdal?
Yeah.
My least favorite Shabbat song.
I can't stand that song.
Oh, I can't tolerate that
Alright,
at
so
all.
the 13 principles of Judaism, 13 articles of our faith, if you will, had absolutely nothing to do with the Constitution, okay? I can just tell you what the last two are, because they're the two that we rejected our right as Reformed Jews. Resurrection of the dead, and the reestablishment of the temple cult. So we don't, yeah, okay? But that's what that is, okay? Just again, a side note, talking about laws that don't exist. So if my battery or my hearing aid goes down on Shabbat, is it okay to replace the battery? If I'm in my house, of course it is. Because my house isn't a room in itself. It's a natural boundary for Shabbat. If I'm here at the temple and I have to go back to the house and get them, there's all kinds of rules in this. The answer is I'm changing the frickin' battery because I want to hear the higher value, but you get the idea.
So one's house is a natural,
A roof, yeah, because you're in your home.
so
So
that
why
means you
can't
could
you-
watch television?
Well, by definition, no, because you're not allowed to start electricity. It doesn't
Okay.
matter. You still can't violate the rules, but you're not carrying anything and you're not going on the public fair, so you're probably in your home. It's the same mishigas with toilet paper. Because there are those who say tearing is one of the prohibitions of Sabbath work. So they have pre-torn toilet paper. When you go to Israel, if you're in a Shabbat observant hotel, which is most of them, they will leave for you on Friday afternoon a packet of toilet paper already pre-torn, or they're just basically single sheets. I'm like, thank you for the tissues, I'm still taking the toilet paper. Whatever, but it doesn't matter.
My great-great-grandfather, my grandmother's
Okay.
grandfather, who I knew,
Wow.
he lived in the home of the daughters of Jacob in the Bronx, and died when I was about 7, a little less than 7. The story is that he always had somebody tear toilet paper for him.
Yeah. Shabbos going.
It's not a story, isn't
Like, I have to go to the bathroom, I need you to do this for me. Like, all right. And somebody might have just thought, oh, you don't have the strength to do it. I don't, No, I'm just saying, if you don't know what the rule is, it really is, so.
But, that was like a family story.
I'm sure. So this principle, this practice of listening, taking notes, and according to tradition, continued until the age of Rabbeinu HaKadosh. He collected all the teachings, all the laws, all the explanations, and from these he composed the text of the Mishnah. In other words, it says that he took all this, put it down. Now, the other tradition of the Mishnah, of course, is Judah HaNasi, or Judah the Prince. He's the one who compiles the Mishnah. So there's a difference of opinion of that. And so the idea was that the oral law could be shared publicly. So why did he do such an innovation instead of perpetuating the status quo? Because he saw the students become fewer, new difficulties arising, the Roman Empire spreading itself, people were becoming assimilated and or killed. I mean, that's essentially what happened. And so therefore, Jewish people were wandering. Well, Jewish people have been wandering ever since the first expulsion with Babylon. But we weren't worried about that because we couldn't see them. What they didn't know is if they had any inkling of Jewish identity and wanted to know what their tradition was, they went to their memory bank or they created a new tradition. So how do we know this? Fast forward 1950. You have this surge of Yemenite Jews coming to live in the land of Israel after the beginning of the state. Right? There were two things they were doing that really upset the European Jews, the Ashkenazim, who were living in the state of Israel. What were they? Number one, their daughters were married off at age 16, and everybody had at least 5 wives. But that's against the law. No, it's not. You made that law in Europe, because you were acquiescing to the church. In our country, it's totally fine, because Islam says you can have up to 5 wives, as long as you take care of each wife equally. And Jewishly, there's no prohibition. That's a rabbinic takana, a rabbinic decree by Gersonides in the 11th century. Number two, they were eating rice on Passover. Again, there's nothing against it in Jewish law. You made a decree in Europe because you thought rice was fermented as a rising agent or leaven. So that, 1950.
Thank you. You solved the dilemma I have with my wife.
You have a dilemma with your wife? You shouldn't have a dilemma with your wife.
Yes, on Passover.
I will show with you, if you remind me, I'll share with you the rabbinic teshuvah, meaning question and answer, on the issue of legumes or kitniyot for Pesach. It was written for Israel, meaning the conservative movement in Israel, so it's only applicable to them, but all of us have embraced it with open arms, because most of the prohibitions of Pesach is based on faulty rabbinic logic. We know that.
But in the Torah, in the red book, the Tanakh, it says you can't eat 5 grains.
That's right, you cannot eat the 5 grains. Yeah, you can buy kosher for Passover oat matzah, you can buy kosher for Passover wheat matzah, which you are. So when it says you can't eat those 5 grains, you can't eat them in their natural state of leavening. You can eat them in their unleavened state, which is exactly how they make matzah. So this is where she is right. For you to go out and buy corn chip, there's already an leavened state. Even though there may not be any leaven in it, it's an 11 state. Because I guarantee you, they did not make it in 18 minutes or less. That's where the problem is.
But corn chips don't leaven.
Again, that's not. Again, now we're getting into semantics. But I'm telling you, with regard to Jewish law, in our house, we do sushi during Pesach and all that because we know what it is. However, that's not over my house. We'll feed them. One less thing for you to worry about. But the point is that that's where you get different. But that's what Mishnah is. Mishnah is these are the laws, because these are the laws as we understand it has been transmitted orally. We already know. And this is not a surprise to anybody in this room. All oral tradition is corrupt by nature. Because once you start transmitting orally, somebody, hopefully unintentionally, will screw up the transmission.
Well, it's like the game of telephone.
Exactly, same concept. Okay, but again, unlike the telephone game when you're playing with kids who sometimes do it anyway to be corruptive,
This is a little...
or you intentionally have a phrase that can easily be corrupted, this was not done intentionally. Unless one of two things happen. One is, what you're transmitting to me is not what I learned from somebody else. So now we're going to start sharing both, which eventually meld in as one. I can't give you an example without really going back to the text and taking a look.
This is just a one question. Where did sushi come into your Seder? For what? Was there a reason, or is it just because you like sushi?
We love sushi, but not in the Seder, by the way. The Seder is about as Ashkenazic as you get in our house.
Oh, okay.
Okay? But during Pesach intermediate days,
Yes.
we will eat rice. That's why sushi
Oh,
is
okay.
okay.
I'm just curious.
That's what we're saying about that. I'll give you a funny example. My congregant in McGee, Arkansas, Dumas, Arkansas, actually, did not keep kosher at all, except during Pesach. And during Pesach, you had everything shipped in from Chicago. I'm like, okay, whatever. And I know people who do that. So, no, I do not think there's no sushi on the Seder plate. In honor of the fish. No, nothing like that at all. I mean, the Seder plate itself is becoming a monstrosity,
Yeah.
Right,
with
that's
all the different causes. Anyway, so the Roman Empire, everything going on, and so he composed a single text available to everyone, so it could be studied, not forgotten. And he and the court taught Mishnahs to the masses. These are the great sages who were part of the court of Hakadosh: Shimon, Gamliel, Ephes, Kania, and all these other names. And these great sages, even though all of the 11 sages mentioned above received the tradition and attended his study sessions, there are differences between them. Because already we know, even though it was, quote, written down in scroll, you had different oral traditions floating around. So Yochanan was a lesser statue. Afterwards, he became a disciple of Rabbi Yanai and received instruction from him. And Rav is also Yudah Hanasi. Rabbi Yanai, in other words, already you had Hillel and Shammai. Hakadosh puts it together, and already you have people going, well, I don't agree with that one, I don't agree with that one. And it's splitting up again. Not a strange concept. Okay, 8. Now we're going to get into the straight down the line for you. Rav composed the Sifra and the Sifrei to explain the sources for the Mishnah. Sifra and Sifrei are texts that were created to show how a text from the Torah, from the oral tradition, came to be the Mishnah. Rav Achia composed the Tosefta. Well, he's not the only one, that's tradition. To explain the subjects discussed in the Mishnah. Hoshaya Bar Chafra composed Baraitot. Baraitot are the stories. And what they've done here is give one person. There's no such thing. We all have stories, and the stories got in there. A Baraita would be a king found a flaw, a diamond, had a crack in it, and make a rose out. Those are the Baraita, the different stories that explain the law. Rabbi Yochanan composed the Jerusalem Talmud in Eretz Israel about 300 years after the destruction of the temple. Not quite.
First temple, second temple.
I'm sorry?
Destruction of the first
temple, yes. When they say the temple, they mean the first temple. I think. Hold on. No, I just said that. I'm second guessing myself. Forgive me.
And if it be the...
Yeah, first temple, yeah. Okay.
So wouldn't they capitalize the T and
I'm sorry, please?
Shouldn't the T be capitalized if it's the temple?
Yeah, so when they say that, they're not talking about the congregation in Atlanta or Cleveland. They call themselves the temple. But they mean the temple, the one in Jerusalem, and in this case, they're referring to the first one. Okay. Because don't forget, most of this history is over before the second temple is destroyed. Which is why there's a difference of opinion about dates between 200 BCE to 200 CE. Because the Talmud, by definition, is canonized close about 500 CE. But it's all in Babylon. It's not in the land of Eretz Israel. The Jerusalem Talmud, there are two. There's the Babylonian Talmud, which is the the official one, if you will. The Jerusalem one is also official. We know they had conversations, but it's missing chunks because they couldn't get it done. Who knows? We don't know the full story. Okay. And then the great sages, Rav, Shmuel, Huna, and all these other people, and all these other traditions. Now, why am I giving you all that? To get to the numbers, because the numbers are easier. There are 40 generations from Rav Ashi to Moses. And they list for you each of everything I just told you, all the way to Moses. And all the source knowledge is God, Adonai of Israel. So all the sages are mentioned are heads of their communities, of their generation. They were members of the great Sanhedrin, the rabbinic court. And each generation, thousands of myriads. In other words, each great leader had students who listened and they passed it on. And then they're telling us Ravina and Rav Ashi were the final generations of the sages of the Talmud. What that means is once the Talmud is closed, when we talk about the Talmud now, remember, we're talking about the middle part of the page, which is Mishnah and Gemara, the law and the teaching and the learning that goes with the law. That part is closed with Ravina and Ashi. All the stuff around it, Rashi and all that other stuff, that's later. The Talmud as you know it does not exist until the Gutenberg press in, 1600 and something, whatever that came out. 1450, whatever it is, and the Vilna press was the first ones who actually, they're the ones who set the Talmud the way we know it. The Talmud before that, it's side by side. In other words, Mishnah, then keep writing. It's like you're writing a paragraph on paper. None of the other stuff around it doesn't exist. That's later. That's all later from the printing press. Okay? And that we have proof. In other words, we have the scrolls where we can say that's all it was. Okay? And Yochanan did the Jerusalem Talmud and all the other stuff. I'm jumping ahead because I want to get to another core piece here. Before you have to leave at 11.
So when you refer to the
11:15.
Okay, we're ending by 11:15, so you're okay. I'm sorry?
so when you refer to the sages, this is the list of the sages. Then.
Correct. Correct. And you can get a book that tells you about the sages, and it gives you much more folklore, some legitimate, some conjecture, of all the sages from Moses until today. In the Hasidic community, both the classic sages, meaning the Amoraim and the Gaonim, first generation, second generation of the sages, to the Rebbes of Eastern Europe, to modern world, trading cards. And they made a mockery of this in the movie, Keeping the Faith. Ben Stiller's rabbi character, the priest friend, gets him like a classic trading card of a rabbi. Very common. Okay? Which to me is kind of funny. So you have the Rabbi Schneider, oh, I got that one. Okay. It's a very close community, so get the idea. All right. On the bottom of 11 of 23. The sources mentioned above relate those matters which were decreed by the sages and prophets in each generation, in order to build a fence around the Torah. Now, when we talk about that phrase, building a fence around the Torah, we're talking about putting the proper boundaries to make sure that the intent of the law is being maintained. This is one of the great criticisms that Orthodoxy has against conservative and Reform Judaism, that we either blur the boundaries or ignore the boundaries altogether. Now, one of the great violators of this, of course, is Rabbi Solomon Freehoff of blessed memory, who was the leader of the Responso, the Jewish Law Committee for Reform Judaism, who would give you a full traditional explanation of why you should do X, Y, and Z, but then at the end would always say, but as Reformed Jews, you now make an informed choice. Which is totally appropriate within our community. What is not appropriate is to say, I'm Reformed, I don't have to. That is not appropriate. So that's where you get the fence around the Torah business. Part of the problem with the, quote, fence around the Torah is sometimes, like our president, the fence becomes a wall that becomes impenetrable. The fence around the Torah was never supposed to be impenetrable. It was meant to be a little fluid and flexible to allow the fence to grow so more people could be followers of it. It was never meant to be restrictive.
Was that how, what we would call the Orthodox feel?
So the answer is they feel that the fence has to be maintained to maintain the integrity of what the law is and the integrity of the community. So for a perfect example is patrilineality. Even though patrilineality is a biblical ideology, the rabbinic decree to make it matrilineality means if your children are not Jewish If your mother's not Jewish, your children are not Jewish. Because the fence has to be very clear. That's the only way you can be identified. So a fantastic story. A friend of Samantha, who Allie might actually end up being interviewing now, when her grandmother was dying last year, on her deathbed, she said, I have something to tell you. Grandma is mother of 11 Catholic children. Turns out, Grandma announced on her deathbed, oh, by the way, I'm Jewish. She fled Nazi Germany in 1939, about a month before the war started. And she made sure they all went to church. She never went. And then apparently her friend did the 23andMe DNA testing. She's 98% Ashkenazic. So, I mean, she's doing a lot of research and so forth. By Jewish law, they're all Jewish. Because Grandma was Jewish, therefore her 11 children are Jewish. If any of her 11 children are female, then their children are Jewish. By Jewish law. By Reform Judaism, they're not. They were raised as Catholics. They identify as Catholics. But that's the fence. That when you say ideal orthodoxy, that's what they're talking about. Okay? And so we are explicitly taught about this practice by Moses. You must observe my precepts, which can be interpreted to mean make safeguards for my precepts. Now, it's interesting they use that proof text, because 1830 is immediately after do not masturbate, do not have homosexual relations, do not have relations with animals. You must guard my precepts. The premise is do not let any of the secular activities that you see interfere with your Jewish identity. Because already by the time